Hello everybody and welcome to the Unity intro. Before we actually get into the Unity game engine, we need to talk about the Unity launcher. If I type in Unity and you have everything installed, the Unity hub will probably pop up first. Even so, if you try to open Unity by itself, it'll still open the hub. Let's just open that and talk about it. So the Unity hub is going to show you everything related to Unity projects, Unity installs. We have some tabs over here. We have our projects tab, and this is going to show us all the projects that we have told Unity Hub to remember. Additionally, we have installs. You're probably going to have this 2021.3.3F1. If you have a different version, that'll just be specified by the teachers. But you can actually have multiple different versions of Unity installed at the same time, and then you can choose them because you may have a project that depended on some specific version. If you're doing augmented reality or just something weird like that, you may want to keep an older version. We also have the Learn tab. Let me just go ahead and make this bigger. You can see a lot of example projects that are provided by Unity here. So for example, if you ever wanted to see how a larger project might handle a RPG system or a first-person shooter or a puzzle game, you can actually open up these projects on your own and explore them. And they often have some tutorials and things to walk you through that as well. So if you just want to learn new things, you can poke around the Learn tab as well. Finally, the Community tab, just lots of extra resources for like news and forums and whatnot. But for us, we're mainly worried about the projects and the installs. Before we create a new project, it is important for me to say that all of this might look slightly different at the time that you're using it. It is possible. The Unity Hub is updated differently and separately than the Unity game engine, so that is just constantly changing. These buttons might look slightly different. The color might look slightly different. Like the layout might be slightly different. But what's important is just the general idea of the step. So you're probably going to see some kind of button called create a new project or new project. We're going to create a new project though. There are lots of different setups for what we want to do inside of Unity. It'll pre-provide us with a lot of different tools and whatnot. We're going to use 3D Core, and this is just going to give us the most basic of all the tools so we can really focus on the fundamentals and not worry about all the subsystems and extra tools and whatnot. So we're going to start with 3D Core. So you're going to click that button right there. The other thing that's really important, especially if you have multiple versions installed, is to come up here. If it's not at the top, it'll be somewhere else, and specify the version of the engine that you want. So in our case, it's going to be 2021.3.3F1. Again, if this is different, it'll be specified by your instructor. We're also going to give our project a name. For me, I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm going to call it Derby Car. We can always rename our project folder later. And finally, click this button right here, and it will ask for a location. I actually like to keep all my projects inside of a project folder on my desktop. So you can see like desktop projects, Unity, and then I keep all my projects here. It's not really required or necessary, but it's just the way that I do it. As long as you're saving it somewhere easy to find. I actually don't recommend saving it in like documents or something. That can get kind of lost and be based on different users or whatever. Just keep it simple, put it on your desktop or put it inside of a folder on your desktop. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select the root folder here. So projects, Unity, don't select anything in there. Hit select folder. And so then our project name, it's going to create a new project inside of our root folder. So our projects folder, it'll name it Derby Car and it'll create. So I'm going to hit the create button and that'll take a little bit of time. So I'm actually going to, it's not that I have a super fast computer. I'm actually going to pause mine, but it may actually take your computer a little bit of time, and that is perfectly normal. So click the button and then we wait. All right. So after that period of creating your project, it's going to automatically open Unity and you're going to see all of this. But for now, we're actually going to close out of this because I want to show you what happens if we accidentally close a project. How do we get it back? Close it. And I'm going to bring this over here. So now you can see in our projects back inside of our Unity Hub, what if we close that too? It's gone. Let's get it back. We're going to type in Unity. Unity Hub will open. And we're going to see the project that we just created, as well as probably an editor version next to here, unless this is changed. If we want to get back in the project, we can click that. It'll open back up. It'll be a lot faster this time, don't worry. And we can get back inside. So I'm going to close this one more time to show you something else. Close. So what I want to do is I want to show you where this stuff exists on your computer and show you how you could potentially move it to a new location. So I'm going to open up a file browser. remember where you saved your project. And if you didn't, this is a good time to figure out where you saved it because you should be able to find it. For me, remember I saved mine to my desktop projects. I'm going to go inside of Unity and I'm going to look for Derby car. So mine's right here. What happens if, let's say you're working in the lab and you want to go work on a different computer, you move this somewhere else. How do you do that? So I'm going to show you. I'm going to Control C. So select Control C. We go to my desktop and I'm going to Control V to paste. And we're going to wait for that to finish. Okay, once that finishes, you see I have my Derby car over my projects folder and I have my Derby car on my desktop. Because it's completed, I'm going to go ahead and delete the one inside of my projects because I don't want to get confused between the two. And maybe you're thinking, why didn't he just cut and paste? I could have, but sometimes you come across weird file errors where it copies half of it, not the other half. This is just a little bit safer. So once I know that it's complete, I can just come in here and delete. That may take a little bit of time as well. Okay, so you see our Derby car project is no longer inside of my original location, and now it's on my desktop. Now here's the problem. If you come back to Unity Hub, you could imagine that you put this on a thumb drive or some other location or whatever. If you come back to Unity Hub and you try to open it up, oh no, it cannot find it. And the reason why is because it's looking right here. If you don't see this little path over here, it's just looking at the original location where you created it. So the problem is this is no longer valid. If we want to open a project in a different location, or if we deleted a project and it thinks it's still there, we need to come over here, or if this looks different, whatever seems like it would delete the project, not delete the project, remove the project from the list. We're going to do that. We're just removing the reference to the old project. Remove. It's not actually deleting your files. So you can see over here, if I open up my folder, I still have everything. But now I want to add the project at its new location. In this case, it's going to be at my desktop, and maybe I'll put it over here so I can see it. To do that, this little open button right here has some extra options. Again, it might look slightly different in a newer version. But for me, if I do the drop down, I'm going to add project from disk. Open remote project is something slightly different. Add project from disk. We're just going to add it from a new location on our computer. Add project from disk. I'm going to navigate to where I saved it. In this case, it's on the desktop. I'm just going to open up the root folder like that. I'm not going to touch anything else. And I'm going to add project. And you can see it popped up and now it's at the new location. So this is just if you want to move your project somewhere else. This is how I recommend doing it. Okay, so now we have our project in our new location and we can open it up. So you should be able to move this between multiple computers. Just make sure that when you bring it to a different computer, you add it, right? You open the project from the new location and you should be fine. So we're going to open that back up now that it's properly linked. And now we should be ready to go. In this video, we're going to get a little bit more familiar with the interface inside of Unity. So there's a few major panels that we have to know about up front. The first one is the scene view. You could imagine this very similar to Maya or some other 3D program where you can just move around, you can position objects in 3D space. You can see that we already have two objects here. We have a directional light, we have a camera. You don't need to worry about what those are yet. If I wanted to move things around, I could. So let's actually create a new object. And if I go to GameObject, 3D Object, and Cube, you're going to see two things happen. One is you're going to see this object added inside something called a hierarchy, and you're going to see a new 3D cube added to the scene. So our hierarchy is very similar to the outliner inside of Maya. It's just a list view of all the objects that are in our currently open scene. You can see I can even collapse that if I want. This is just a big box of objects. And we see the cube, so the visual representation of this object in the world. So we could, build a ground plane, we could build a cube, we could build other shapes. It doesn't really matter. That's the hierarchy, a list of our objects, and our scene view, which is just how our objects are positioned in the world. So if I select an object, so this cube, for example, if I want to move my camera around, it's just like Maya controls. You can hold down Alt, you can left mouse button, you can rotate or orbit or whatever it's called. You can middle mouse while holding Alt, and that's going to do this. And you can right mouse button while holding Alt, and you'll zoom in and out. So that's all nice and very familiar if you've been using Maya so far. Another thing you can do is if you hit the F key, it'll focus in really quick. That's also extremely useful. So you can just start practicing this right here, like just move around, hit F to focus, and we're pretty good. we can make other shapes too, 3D object, plane. We can move our cube on top of the plane if we want. It's fine. This thing right here that I pressed, QWER. Q is just a deselect and allow you to click and drag the camera around. Not super useful. W will bring up the translate manipulator, which will allow you to move the object around like that. E will rotate, and R will scale. So again, very similar to Maya. You're going to notice a lot of commonalities between these two programs. So I can move that up a little bit if I want. Again, I just recommend that you just practice this and experiment, move around. Another thing that I want to show you is if you prefer, you can hold the right mouse button and you can look around like that. But while holding the right mouse button, if I do WASD, kind of like a lot of common computer games, you can actually move around as if it's some kind of first-person shooter or some kind of just walking game, and you can move around that way. If you press Q and E while holding down the right mouse button, you can move up and down. You can also, while holding down the right mouse button, you can drag up and down your mouse wheel like that, and that will just allow you to move faster or slower if you want. So two different options. Again, that's the Maya controls with the Alt and mouse buttons, or hold down right mouse button and you can move around like it's more of a game. And both are going to be more useful depending on what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to zoom in, get a very specific thing, you may want the Maya controls. Or if you just want to zoom around the level, you may want the right mouse button controls. So either one's good. I just recommend that you experiment. You can actually try to create other objects as well. You can poke around in here. For example, what if we make a new light, point light, like that? We can just add objects to our scene, which is pretty cool. Just see what happens. And we'll get into more of this in future videos. Next, we're going to talk about the project panel. Now, the project panel is similar to the hierarchy, but very different in a crucial way. Our hierarchy is a list of all the game objects that are inside of our scene, all of our objects in the world. And these objects really only exist inside of our scene right here. Our scene is a file on our computer. So you can see that over here. If I select the scenes folder down in the project folder right here, or the project panel right here, this is our scene file. And all of this information, all these objects, are inside of this file. Now our project panel is all of our files for our project. Specifically, like if I right click my scene file and I say show in Explorer, or if you're on a Mac, maybe it's slightly different, you can see this is a file on our computer. You can also see that we have assets, scenes, and up here we have assets, scenes. So our project folder is actually a direct mirror of our project on our hard drive. So we can go back up here. I can click through here. We can see our project folder on our desktop is called Derby Car Assets, right? Assets is our root folder down here in our project file. And we have scenes. So check this out. If I come back into assets and I right click and I create a new folder, and I'm doing this inside of my browser window, not the project file yet. And inside of my browser, if I right click and I create a new folder, I'm going to call this scripts maybe. And if I click back inside of Unity, you see it creates a new folder because it's trying to mirror the setup exactly from my window browser. Now I can do the opposite as well. I can come back into Unity and I can go in here and I can create a folder and we can call this maybe materials. And you can see I make it right there. If I go back into my browser, you can see a folder called materials is created. So the reason why I'm showing you this is to show you that our assets folder is actually in our project panel, which is just mirroring what's on our hard drive. So this is just showing us what is on our computer. And if we had extra files like an FBX file, image files, or whatever, those are files that are on our hard drive. The other reason why this is really important is because if there are any files that don't belong inside of the project folder and our assets, we don't want to put it in there or Unity is going to get confused. So for example, any of you sound designers out there or music composers, let's say you had an FL Studio or a Pro Tools, the sound editing program, or let's say Audacity or whatever. If you put any of those files inside of assets, it's not going to recognize it and it's going to get confused and it's going to give you errors and all this other bad stuff. So it's really important that inside of our assets folder and therefore inside of our project folder right here, we keep this only looking at Unity files. So we'll walk through what that means later, but I really just wanted to tell you, like, don't just throw anything inside of this assets folder, or don't just throw anything inside this assets folder inside of your project folder as well. We will mainly manipulate this through Unity and importing things or whatever. Don't just put things in here. It can be very bad. But that's the project folder. Essentially, it's just a mirror of what's on your hard drive, and it's very different than what's inside of your scene file, right? Like our scene file, if I double click, that will open up everything inside that scene. I didn't really save anything, right? Anything I was doing before, I opened up a new scene and I didn't save it, so it's all gone, which is fine because I wasn't really making anything substantial. But let's say if I did want to save it, I could come over here to 3D object, I can make a cube, and then I'm inside of my sample scene now. If I Control S, that will save, and you'll see the asterisk is gone. The asterisk lets us know that we were not saving our scene, and we had some unsaved changes in there. So if I make changes, right, I move the cube, it's unsaved again, Control S, save, and I'm working inside of my sample scene. We'll actually make a new scene later. For now, this is all throwaway and just experimentation. So hierarchy is, you know, things that are inside of our open scene, and project folder is everything that is inside of our hard drive. In this video, we're going to talk briefly about the inspector panel, which is going to be extremely important as we start to get more into gameplay later on. So the inspector panel is essentially like the, I think it's called the details panel or the channel editor or whatever, inside of Maya. But it's basically when you select an object, the inspector panel over here will give you a lot of extra information about that object. So for example, if we create a new empty one, GameObject create empty, you'll see an empty object really doesn't have anything on it except for a transform component. Like we can give it a new name. You know, we can call this empty object, you know, just to show you can manipulate this stuff. You can also position it in world space either with the manipulators, which you can see that is actually changing its position in the world, or we can just put the values in here directly, like that. So 0, 0, 0, and change the rotation or the scale if you want. But this is an empty object, it doesn't matter, so we're going to delete it just to show you. Our cube, we can select that. We can actually reposition this as well, showing you that you can use the manipulators, but really this is just altering the data on this object to reposition it in the world. You can do that manually, right? Scale with R, rotate with E, or we can just put it directly in. Now, the other thing about the inspector is that it may have additional components on it. So for example, on our box, we have a box collider. We could actually turn that off if we want. We could enable or disable the component. We could actually remove it if we want. We could right click and remove component. We'll get more into this later. I can undo that to get it back. We can add an additional component. For example, we could add a light, maybe. We add component and type in light, hit enter, and now our cube has a light. We can do a lot of stuff in the inspector panel, but this is just where we manipulate data that is on our object. So you can actually click around. You can make new objects, right? Like I could come up to GameObject, I could click light, make a point light. Let's rename that back to light. I pressed F2 as a hotkey to rename. Super handy if you don't know about it. Press W to move that out, and now we have a light. So you can actually experiment. You can see what pre-configured objects are in here. There's some weird ones, so don't get too crazy with it, but you know, you can make different shapes. You can see if I click a capsule, it's a little bit different. We have a different mesh filter in here and whatnot, but yeah, that's all our inspector panel does, is lets us manipulate data related to this object. In this video, we're going to introduce the concept of a game object and a component. So a game object is any object in our scene. You can see we can create an empty game object and there's nothing on it. We could also create a cube like we already have been. And you can see that a cube is defined by an empty game object plus a few components. Each of these little things right here is called a component, and we can actually add additional ones. So, you know, we could add a light, type in light. We can add an audio source. Maybe it can play sounds or something. We already have a collider here. You know, we can add a lot of stuff to this. Now, this is still just a game object with more components on it. So a component is going to give the game object either functionality or data or both in a lot of cases. And we can actually create our own components, which we'll do later on. So let's take this concept even further. What if we wanted to build a cube from an empty game object? We could actually go up to GameObject, create empty. And so this is nothing, right? Like it's nothing. We can relabel this cube, but just because we call it cube doesn't mean it's a cube because there's really nothing on it, right? It's an empty GameObject labeled cube. So if we wanted to make this a cube, we could, for example, if we look back on our cube, what is it that makes this cube a cube? Well, it's a mesh renderer, which tells Unity how to render a mesh in the viewport. So we could actually come over here and, not click that. We're going to click on our, well, let's relabel this new cube just so we can find it. We're going to add a mesh renderer like that. You can see it's a pre-built component. And, we can give it a material, whatever. We don't have that yet. Let's look back at our cube. We also have a cube mesh filter. So let's go back to new cube and add mesh filter. So this will allow us to define a mesh to use for this game object. If we click the little bullseye button, we can see some pre-built ones that we get from Unity, just some primitives. I'm going to click on cube. All right, so now we have a mesh, but it's a little confused on the rendering right here. Anytime you see this pink material, this just means that Unity doesn't know how to render it because it doesn't have a material to render it by. So if I come up here and I expand materials in the mesh renderer, you see there's no material there. Let's actually make a new one. I'm going to come down to my project view because a material is something that exists as a file on our computer, not something inside the scene. I'm going to come back to my project file right here, and I'm going to create material. I'm just going to call this m_testcube. Doesn't really matter. Probably going to delete it later. And over here, your material inspector might look slightly different. All I want is just to keep the defaults, and I'm going to click and drag onto the material right there. Now, if I release, it's actually going to reassign the material. I'm actually not going to do that. If you did, it's actually fine, but you could do that, right? You could drag and release it and it would be there, or you could drag and release it and put it inside the mesh renderer right there. Either way, it does the same exact thing. And just to show you, like, we built this cube from scratch from an empty game object. Well, actually, you can see that there's also a box collider. You don't always need a box collider. If you wanted, we could add a box collider. It doesn't really matter. The reason I'm doing it this way is just to show you that a game object is just an empty container that we assign components to. And we can build our own. We can come up here and we can create some that are already pre-configured, right? Like these are just the ones that Unity pre-designed to give to us, but we could create our own. Components are modular. They can be added to any game object and give it new functionality. So I hope this at least makes it a little bit more clear. Game object is just a concept of an object, an empty container in our world, and components are little modular pieces of functionality that we add to a game object. So we'll go into more detail on this later. In this video, I'm going to show you a few ways in which you can customize your panel interface, our windows, and drag them around and do different layouts. Because at different points during this tutorial series, you may see slightly different layouts. And I want to show you how you can either alter yours to be more like the video or just find your own workspace that you prefer. So the first thing that you should know is that you can actually drag around most windows inside of Unity. So we can take our hierarchy, we can move it over here, we can put it right next to our inspector, we can take our project, we can put it down there. Really, you can just drag windows to where it makes sense to have them, or you can just have them free floating if you want. I actually don't like to do this, but I'll show you what my preferred setup is. If you go to Layout, you can see a few different options here. You're going to see one called Atoms. This is just one that I saved, so you can actually customize and then save one out and name it whatever you want. So I'm going to click 2x3, and then you'll see this layout right here, where the scene view is over here, the game view is down here. This is what we would see inside of the game at this moment. We have our hierarchy, our project, and our inspector. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my project view, I'm going to drag this down just like that. So this way I can see my hierarchy, my project down below it, and I can still see my inspector. Another thing that I like to do over here with our icons inside of our assets folder, this little slider will actually make the icons bigger or smaller. What I prefer to do is I like to drag this all the way to the left. That way everything is presented in a list view. Another thing you're going to see is our scenes over here. If we click through, you see how we only see our files if we have a certain folder selected. Well, I actually don't like that. I just want to use this as a browser. And to disable this split window thing, I'm just going to go over to this little 3 dots at the top right. Again, this might look slightly different if you're using a different version of Unity, but I'm going to click that and I'm going to go to one column layout. Once you click that, you can see that all of our files are presented as a list, as if this was just a separate browser. So this is how I prefer to customize my viewport. I'm actually going to put mine back to default in case you would just rather see it that way, but I really just wanted to briefly show you how you could customize this and make your own. Or if you see different arrangement of windows in different tutorial videos, this is how you can do that. So I'm going to go back to the default, and we're just going to work from this one in the future tutorial videos. Something you're going to come across inside of Unity that's really important to understand is the difference between play mode and editor mode while you are tweaking your objects. So for example, if I'm normally just messing around and experimenting, I can move my objects and they're set, I can rotate them or whatever it is you normally do. But when I hit play mode, while play mode is active, I can still move my objects around, right? Like I could go here, I can change whatever, and you'll see that I'm in play mode because of that blue play button up there. But as soon as I exit play mode, you see how everything reverts back to before I press play? This is because during the game's runtime, we would actually want to manipulate objects and change things, but as soon as we leave, we don't really want to keep any of that. We want to keep it at the state it was before we hit play mode. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because you may, for example, you could make a point light, you could position this, whatever. And let's say you're trying to light your scene, but you forgot that you were in play mode or you just didn't remember or whatever. And then I'm changing my color, right? I'm going in here. Maybe I'm changing some values on the player. Maybe I'm tweaking some of my mechanics. And then I realize, uh-oh, I was in play mode. I exit play mode and all my changes are gone. There's a few ways around this. The main way around this is just to be very aware of when you're in play mode and when you're not. Some trick that a lot of people use is if you come up to Edit and you go to Preferences, you open this up, you can actually tint your editor while it's in play mode just as a little visual cue that you're in play mode. So what people do is they'll come down here to General Play Mode Tint, click this color, maybe you give it like a, I don't know, let's do like a blue. And we don't want to go overboard, we just want it to be slightly tinted, something like that. So now when we hit play, see how my editor kind of changes? And maybe that's too much. Maybe I'll turn it back a little bit, something like that. And so now when I hit play mode, if I happen to be tweaking values and things, it's very obvious to me that, you know, this color, I can see that I'm in play mode and I'll know, oh, right, maybe I should not make these changes until after I exit. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you could do is you could actually, while in play mode, if you're messing with a single component, so let's say our light over here, let's say I change my color, change my intensity, just whatever, I was messing with it. You can actually right click a component, say copy component, exit play mode, come back to the same component and paste component values. And you'll see that I can keep all the changes that I had in play mode. So that's something you can do if you realize that you're making changes on something like while you're in play mode and you realize, oh, I'm going to lose these changes. Maybe I can copy them, exit play mode and paste. But that only works if you are making changes to one particular component. So anyway, something to be aware of, and this is going to be more relevant later on whenever we're tweaking the player and the camera and all this other stuff. You're going to accidentally lose work if you don't keep track of whether or not you're in play mode, but do be aware that this is how Unity works. Now let's talk about how to build our game out so that other people can play it. It's going to be really simple right now. We haven't gone into game design or level design or anything like that. It's just a simple car moving around. But we do want other people to not have to install Unity just to play our game. So to build out our game, we're going to go to File and open up Build Settings. And this is going to bring up a window that will allow us to choose different platforms to build on. I'm not going to click any of the other platforms right here. I'm going to stay on Windows. That's my target platform. And the big thing about this screen is we need to make sure that any scenes that we want to be in our final game are in this scenes and build. Right now, there's nothing in here. Sometimes it'll use the default scene that's currently open or whatever. We don't want to rely on that. We want to specify exactly what we want to happen when we build out our game. Let's find our scene down here. So it's going to be our sandbox. We're going to drag and drop that into there. If I were to click add open scenes, it would, whatever scene I have open, it would put in there. So make sure that it's the sandbox scene that we've been working in. Just in case, I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to save my scene with Control S as well. And I'm going to click on build. Now, it is entirely possible that if you are using Unity on a personal machine, that you may not have installed something called, I think it's like ILCP or something like that. If this build does not work, you may need to go in and install an additional module. Let me show you what that looks like. If you're working on a lab machine though, it's probably fine and probably was installed with it. But I just want to make sure that you know. If I go to my installs inside of my Unity hub and I go to add modules and I scroll down, this right here, this Windows build support, if we're building for a Windows machine, this IL2CPP, this needs to be installed in order for this build to work. Again, if you installed Unity, it's possible that you did not check this checkbox to install that. So if this next part does not work, you need to make sure that you do install this module, and then we could do that, but ours is already installed. If you're working on a Mac, you would probably also need to install Windows build support because you are building out for a Windows machine. So I'm going to back out of here. I imagine most of you probably have this already installed, which is fine. Once I have that set up, I have my sandbox map here. I'm going to click on build, and it's going to ask me where I want to save my build. Now, this is the most important part of saving out a build. Do not save your build in assets, and honestly, don't save your build in any of these other folders as well. If you save your build in assets, if I double click assets and I save my build here, very bad things will happen. You'll get a lot of errors. You'll be very confused. Your Unity will stop working because it has all these extra files it doesn't know what to do with. Don't do that. I'm going to go back. This is my root folder. This is my project Derby car. Inside, I see all these folders. I'm going to create a new folder, right click, new folder. I'm going to call this builds. And this is going to contain all the builds that I make. I'm going to double click my builds. Now I'm inside my builds folder. If I were to save it right here, it would throw all my new files into this folder. But what if I have more than one build? I actually want to put these in one extra folder. So because this is my first build, I'm going to make a new folder inside of builds, call this build 01. Go inside of build 01, and this is where I want to save all my build files. So I'm going to click select folder, and it's going to build out my game. This may take a little bit, usually not too long, but it'll take a little bit. So just wait for this to finish. Once this is complete, you should see build completed, and it'll tell you how long it took. Again, if you got an error message, especially if it said something about the IL2CPP or whatever, just make sure that you install that module as I showed you. So now it's going to open a window, or if it didn't, you can navigate to the builds folder that you specified, and you're going to see this right here. I'm going to back up. This is our project folder. Those are builds. We saved it inside of this folder, and it dumped some files into this folder. Now our exe is what is going to run the game. If I double click exe, it's going to run the game. It's really important that you understand that in order for this exe to run the game, all these other files need to be here. It's also entirely possible that your files here may look slightly different than mine. Things change, Unity changes. The most important thing is that you don't delete any files, you don't rename any files, you keep this all as is, and you double click .exe. So I'm going to do that. This will open up, and we can move our car around, just like we did in the editor, but now it is a standalone build. You could technically save this out and send it to your friends. We can just experiment a little bit. And here's the next problem. We didn't really build in a way to exit our game. So this is pretty common with prototyping. It's best practice to build this in, but for now, we're going to hold down Alt and press F4. You may also have to hit a function key if you're on a laptop to get access to F4. But essentially, you want to Alt F4 or find some way to press those keys. It might be slightly different if you're on a Mac. So I'm going to do Alt F4. That just auto closes whatever program is active. So once that closes, we have our build. We are good to go. But before I send this to my friend, what I want to do is I want to click my folder that contains all my files right here. I want to right click that and say send to compressed zipped folder. And what that's going to do is that's going to zip up my file into something that cannot easily be opened. And the reason I want to do this is because when I pass folders with files inside around, if I zip it up, this is all self-contained as one file right here, and then I can unpack it later. It just makes fewer things go wrong if I'm sending this over some kind of network or some kind of system. We don't really want these free-floating files. We just want to zip it up. You imagine like you're shipping a package to a friend, right? You want to put everything in a box, you want to tape it up, secure it, and then give them the box. You don't want to just put lots of random things in the mail, right? So this is my folder. So now I could name this whatever I want. I can actually take this. Let's make a copy of this on my desktop just in case. Desktop, paste it. I sent it to my friend. They take my file, they right click, they say extract all, click extract. 7-zip would be a little faster and more efficient, but it's fine. It will extract it. We can open up the folder, and then we can run our game. So there we go. This is how you can build out a game and send it to people to play, and they don't even have to have Unity installed.